Hey guys, I'm T and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we make trendy and fun crochet tutorials twice a week, and if you haven't already, smash that like button, drop a comment down below, and subscribe to join in on the fun. For today's tutorial, we're making a casual sweater with just a dash of fancy from an all-new collar design for the channel, paired with a stitch combo we all love. The perfect start to sweater season. Speaking of, if you're ready for loads of beautiful crochet sweaters, you're in the right place. We have hundreds of the easiest to follow crochet sweater tutorials and patterns, with even more dropping twice weekly, so consider clicking the bell to subscribe and you'll never miss an upload. Also, do me a huge favor and give this video a big thumbs up if you like it, or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to show support so I can keep putting out free tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday. Now, it's time to get on the show, so without further ado. For this project, any category 4 yarn will work, but I used a total of 410 grams of yarn. That's 910 yards if you're stateside. As for tools, a 6mm hook, scissors, stitch markers, and a tape measure. There is a written pattern down below. Use offer code TCDDIY for a discount off any $9.99 plus order, and enter this week's pattern giveaway by telling us how many pets you have and what they are. Unfortunately, at the moment, I don't have any pets. We're using 2 stitches for this project, and they'll be as follows. Chain, slip stitch, and single crochet. This tutorial is made for a size small. You can adjust it for your size, and we explain how to in the video, so let's get started. Getting this top started, we're all going to grab our category 4 yarn and make a slip knot. Then we're all going to grab our 6mm hook and start off by making an even number chain that starts at the top of our shoulder down toward like the bottom of the sweater to be, keeping in mind that we will have a bottom band as well. I'd like for mine to be just about 16.5 inches or 42 centimeters. So I'm going to start by making a chain 60, and I actually already have this portion of my panel completed, so I'm just going to be doing a small sample size with you. So now that we have our chain, we're all going to block off that last chain and get started on our first row, which is a moss stitch row. Now for this piece, it is going to be a 3-row repeat. Now whenever we're getting started on a moss stitch row, we're all going to start with a chain 2. That first chain counts as a turning chain. That second chain counts as a chain. Then we're going to single crochet into the 4th chain from our hook. So here's 1, 2, 3, which is the one that we blocked off, and 4. Into that 4th chain, we're going to bring our hook down and insert with just 1 single crochet, giving us our first 2 stitches for this row. That first is that chain space, that second is that single crochet. Then we're going to continue doing a chain 1, skip a stitch, and into the next with a single crochet. Now, so far, we should have a total of 4 stitches for this row, which is that chain space, single crochet, chain space, single crochet, and from here we're going to continue to chain 1, skip a stitch, single crochet into the next to reach the end of the chain. We've made our way all the way down with our row 1. Now, the second row and our 3-row repeat is going to be another moss stitch row. So whenever we're getting started with a moss stitch row, we're always going to chain 2. That first chain counts as a turning chain, second chain counts as a chain, and flip. We are all going to skip that first stitch from our previous row, which is that single crochet, and into that next stitch, which is our chain space, insert with a single crochet. Then chain 1, skip a stitch, single crochet into that next stitch, which is our chain space again, and together we shall have a total of 4 stitches. That first stitch is that chain space, second single crochet, third chain space, 4th single crochet, and from here continue to chain 1, skip a stitch, single crochet into the next to reach the end of the row. We are back and our first 2 rows are completed. Now the final row in our 3-row repeat is simply a single crochet row. So getting started on a single crochet row, we're all going to chain 1, flip our work and put 1 single crochet into every stitch and chain space. So into the top of that last stitch from our previous row, insert with a single. Into that following stitch, which is our chain space, insert with another single. Continue with 1 single crochet into every stitch to reach the end of the row. Now from here, all we're going to do is continue to repeat that 3-row repeat until we have a shoulder portion that can reach from 2 inches past the tip of our shoulder all the way in until we reach the side of the base of our neck. Then I'll meet everyone back right after a single crochet row. Now as you guys can see, my shoulder portion is complete. I have a total of 27 rows. My width is roughly 6.5 inches or 16 centimeters. Now we're going to get started on our neckline. So first things first, we're going to place this up to ourselves, Placing the top edge of our shoulder at the top of our shoulder, making sure that our working yarn is along the bottom. Then insert our stitch marker into any even numbered stitch from the top that's roughly an inch beneath the base of our neck. Now I've inserted my stitch marker into the 20th stitch from the top, that's just about 5 inches or 13 centimeters. Everyone's following row should be a moss stitch row, so since we're along the bottom, chain 2. Flip our work, do our moss stitch all the way up until we reach our stitch marker stitch. We've just made our way all the way up until we have reached our stitch marker stitch. From here, it is still going to be our 3-row repeat. So since we just finished up our first moss stitch row, from where we're at, chain 2, flip our work, moss stitch all the way down, then our following row is a single crochet row, so at the end of that row, chain 1, flip our work, and single crochet all the way up. Once we have our first 3 neckline rows completed, I will meet you guys back. We are back and our first 3 neckline rows are complete. Now for the neckline, we're going to continue to repeat our 3-row repeat with no increases and no decreases until we have a portion that can reach across our chest over to the other side of the base of our neck. Then I will meet you guys back right after our second moss stitch row that ends along the top. And just as a really quick tip, sometimes the second moss stitch row can end along the bottom because we have an odd number row repeat. But I will meet you guys back once we're along the top. Then we can finish up with the shoulder from there together. So we are back. Our neckline is complete. Now I have a total of 44 rows. My width is now 10.5 inches or 27 centimeters. Now from here we're going to finish up with our shoulder. So since we all should have ended along the top, we're all going to start by making a chain for the same amount of stitches that we skipped when we got started on our neckline. So for those of you that have my numbers, I inserted my stitch marker into the 20th stitch from the top. So from where we're at, I went ahead and made a chain 20. Then all we're going to do from here is continue on with our 3-row repeat for the same amount of shoulder rows that we started with. So just to get started on this following shoulder row, we're going to block off that last chain and do a chain 1. The following row in our row sequence is a single crochet row. So into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, we are all going to insert with a single crochet. And from here, continue with 1 single crochet into every chain. Then once we reach the body, 1 single crochet into every stitch, then make our way all the way down. 2 moss stitch rows with no increases and no decreases, and I'll meet you back once when this shoulder portion is completed. So we are back. The entirety of my front panel is complete. My total width is just about 16.5 inches or 42 centimeters. Now we're going to get started on the back panel. Now the back panel will be done exactly the same way as our front panel, but without the cutout. So start by making a chain for the same amount of chains that we made for the front panel's shoulder. Then continue on with our 2 moss stitch and single crochet row repeat, making our way all the way across for the same amount of rows as the front panel. Once we have that completed, I will meet you guys back so we can seam the shoulders together. So once when both our front and back panel are completed, we're going to place the front panel on top of our back panel and insert our hook into the top corner stitch of both the front and the back, and we're going to seam the shoulders. So start by pulling our working yarn through and do a chain up of 1 to secure. What we're going to do from here is 1 single crochet into every side row. So finding that first side row, this is mine right here, I'm going to find that top loop, insert, same top loop within the back panel, insert, and single crochet around everything. Again, next side row, this is mine right here, find that top loop, find that following side row within the back panel, find that top loop, and insert with a single, and continue this till we don't have any more side rows left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and repeat on the other side. So we are back. We have just completed seaming our shoulders. Now we're going to seam up our sides. So first things first, we're all going to need to insert a stitch marker into any stitch from the top for the width that we like for the sleeve to be. Now if you'd like for it to be a looser sleeve, insert your stitch marker lower, or a little bit more slim, insert it higher. I wanted mine to be, I guess, regular sized, so I inserted my stitch marker into the 25th stitch from the top. That's just about 6 inches or 15 centimeters. Now from here, making sure the work is still flipped wrong side out, meaning the seams that we have for the shoulders are still on the outside, we're going to insert our hook into the bottom corner stitch of both the front and the back panel and do a single crochet seam all the way up. What we're going to do is pull our working yarn through and do a chain up of 1 to secure. Then from here, finding that first stitch into the front panel, insert, first stitch into the back panel, insert, and single crochet around everything. Let's do that once more. Into that next stitch into the front, insert, next stitch into the back, insert, single crochet, and just continue this until we reach our stitch marker. Once we do a chain up of 1 and cut, then repeat on the other side. We are back. So everything is all seamed up, and the next we're going to do is the length of our sleeve. So making sure that our work is flipped right side out, we're going to insert our hook into the stitch that we have that's nearest to the side seam within the armhole. Then what we're all going to do from here is make an even number chain the length that we'd like for the sleeve to be. I'd like for mine to be a long sleeve, so I'm going to start by making a chain 70, and that's roughly 17.5 inches or 45 centimeters. Now that we have our chain, we're going to do our 3-row repeat starting with our moss stitch row. So block off that last chain and do a chain 2. That first chain is our turning chain, second chain counts as a chain, then we're going to single crochet into the 4th chain from our hook. So here's 1, 2, 3, and 4. Into that 4th chain, we're going to insert with a single crochet. Now that we have just completed our first chain space and single crochet, that should give us our first 2 stitches for this row. From here, continue to chain 1, skip a stitch, single crochet into the next till we make our way all the way down our chain. So we just made our way all the way down with our first moss stitch row. Now we're going to connect it into the base. So into the base, we're just going to find that next available stitch, insert with a slip stitch. Now that slip stitch into the base doesn't actually count as a stitch, that's just to connect. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that following stitch into the base. Still does not count as a stitch, and flip our work. Now whenever we are along the base working our way out with a moss stitch row, we are always going to start the row off with a chain 1. We are going to skip that first stitch, which should be a single crochet from our previous row, and single crochet into the next, which should be our chain space, giving us our first 2 stitches, which is that chain space and single crochet. From here, continue to chain 1, skip a stitch, single crochet into the next until we reach the end of the row. Then the following row in our 3-row repeat is a single crochet row. So at the end of this row, chain 1, flip our work, and put 1 single crochet into every stitch, and I'll meet you back at the end of our row 3. So we are back. We've made our way down with our single crochet row, and now we should all have a total of 3 rows completed. Now we're just going to connect it into the base, and it will be done the same way as our previous row. So just a slip stitch into the base, find that next stitch with a slip stitch. Still doesn't count as a stitch, and that's it. From here, we're just going to continue to repeat our 3 previous rows, making our way all the way up and around. No increases, no decreases. Then I'll meet you back to seam it up, but since we're here, we might as well get started on the following row. Now our row 4 is going to be a moss stitch row. So just to get that started, slip stitch into that following stitch into the base. And like I said, whenever we are getting started on a moss stitch row that starts along the base, we're going to chain 1, flip our work, skip that first stitch, making sure we're not working into any of those slip stitches into the base. So skip that first stitch and single crochet into the next to reach the end of the row. Then the following row is a moss stitch row, then a single crochet row. I will meet you back once we're worked into every stitch so we can seam it all together. So we are back. We have just made our way all the way around with our sleeve. We don't have any more stitches left to work into, so now we're going to seam it all up together. As you guys can see, I have already went ahead and seamed mine up. So this is actually going to be the same seam that we did for the sides. So making sure that our work is flipped wrong side out so that all the seams can be along the same side, we're just going to do our same single crochet seam, making our way all the way up. When we don't have any more stitches left to work into, do a chain up a 1 and cut, and then I'll meet you guys back so we get started on the cuff. So getting started on the cuff, we're going to make sure that our work is first flipped right side out, meaning all of our seams are now along the inside. Then insert our hook into any one of the side rows that we have along the edge of our sleeve. We're going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure, and simply put 1 single crochet into every side row. So starting with our first side row, this is mine right here. I'm going to find that top loop and insert with just 1 single crochet. Again, this is my following side row. Find that top loop and insert with 1 single crochet. That's it. We're going to continue on with our single crochet row, making our way all the way around, then slip stitch into that chain space. So now that our single crochet row is complete, we're now going to get started on the cuff. Start by making a chain the length that we'd like for the cuff to be. Now I'd like for mine to be just about 3 inches or 8 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 18. Now that we have our chain, we're all going to block off that last chain and do a chain 1. Now that chain 1 doesn't actually count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. Then into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, we're all going to insert with a slip stitch. So insert, yarn over, and gently pull through everything on our hook. Again, into that next chain, insert, yarn over, gently pull through everything. From here, continue with 1 slip stitch into every chain, and we do want to make sure that we're not tugging too tightly after every stitch, otherwise the following row could be too tight to work into. So now that we've made our way all the way down with our slip stitch row, we're now going to connect it into the base. All we're going to do is find that next available stitch into the base, insert with a slip stitch. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that following stitch into the base, none of those slip stitches count as a stitch, and flip our work. Then 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. So finding the last stitch from our previous row, not working into any of those slip stitches into the base, we're going to insert into that back loop or the loop that's furthest away from us, yarn over and gently pull through everything on our hook. Again, next stitch is back loop, pull through everything. From here, continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Then at the end of the row, chain 1, flip our work, and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch again, and then I'll meet you back at the end of our row 3. We've made our way down with our first 3 rows. Now we're going to connect it into the base the same way that we just did. So all we're going to do, again, find that next stitch into the base, insert with a slip stitch, doesn't count as a stitch. Then into that next available stitch into the base, insert with another slip stitch, still doesn't count as a stitch, and flip our work. And from here, put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. All we're going to do is continue to repeat our 2 previous rows until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, I'll meet you back so we can seam it all together. So we've made our way all the way around with our back loop slip stitch rows. Now from here, we're going to seam it together. Now this seam is going to be an outside loop slip stitch seam, so we're going to make sure that our work is flipped right side out, then insert our hook into the corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. All we're going to do is yarn over, pull through everything on our hook, and do our first outside loop slip stitch seam together. So start by finding that first stitch into the front panel, insert only into that front loop, first stitch into the back panel, insert only into that back loop, then yarn over, pull through everything on our hook. And that's it. We're going to continue doing that till we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut, then repeat on the other side. Alright, so we are back. We're ready to get started on the bottom band. So first things first, we're going to make sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up, then insert our hook into any one of the side rows that we have along the bottom of our piece. Then we're going to start with a single crochet row, just putting 1 single crochet into every side row, making our way all the way around, then I'll meet you back. So we are back. Our single crochet row is complete. Now we're going to get started on the bottom band, and the bottom band is actually going to be done exactly the same way as our cuff. So all we're going to do is make a chain the length that we'd like for the bottom band to be. Coincidentally, I would like for my bottom band to be the same length as my cuff, so 3 inches or 8 centimeters. So I'm going to make a chain of 18 again. Then just do my back loop slip stitch rows with no increases, no decreases, making my way all the way around. When we don't have any more stitches left to work into, I will meet you guys back so we can seam it all together. So now that we've made our way all the way around with our bottom band, we're going to seam it together, but the seam is actually going to be done exactly the same way that we did our cuff. So just to talk you guys through it, we're all going to do an outside loop slip stitch seam. Making sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up, we're going to do an outside loop slip stitch seam till we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut. So we are back. Now the next thing we're going to do is our collar. So what we're all going to do from here is make sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up. Insert our hook into any one of the stitches that we have, then we're going to do a single crochet row. But first things first, we're all going to need to insert our stitch marker into the middle row that we have within the back panel. We should all have just 1 middle row, so I went ahead and inserted my stitch marker into there. Now all we're going to do is just 1 single crochet into every side row, 1 single crochet into every stitch. But once we reach the side rows within the front panel, we are going to meet back because we do need to insert our stitch markers into some places. So just make your way all the way around wherever you inserted your hook, and then once we reach our first side row within the front panel, I'll meet you guys back just to show you where we're going to be inserting our stitch marker. So we've just made our way down to our first side row within the front panel. All we're going to do is insert a stitch marker into that last stitch, then put 1 single crochet into every side row. Once we reach our first stitch on this side, into that first stitch, insert a stitch marker into there to match this stitch marker. Then continue making our way all the way around, making sure that we are inserting our stitch marker into the same side row as our back panel. Once we made our way all the way around, make sure that this single crochet row isn't too tight. This is going to be as wide as it can stretch, so if it is a little bit too tight, reduce some stitches with a looser grip, or if it's too loose, reduce some stitches with a tighter grip. Then slip stitch into that chain space and do a chain up 1 and cut, then I'll meet you back. So we are back and our single crochet row is complete. Now what we're going to do from here is our collar. So first things first, we're going to make sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up. Then insert our hook into our right stitch marker stitch, and we're going to be working across to our next stitch marker stitch first because it's going to be done in 2 panels, but will be done the same way. So go ahead and insert your hook into that stitch marker stitch, insert your yarn onto your hook, and pull through. So what we're going to do is start with a chain 1. That chain 1 is just as secure, it will not count as a stitch. Then working our way across, we're going to be doing front loop slip stitches. We're doing front loop slip stitches to leave the available back loops so that when we do the other side, we have those back loops to work into. So finding that next available stitch, this is mine right here. I'm going to insert my hook only in through that front loop, then yarn over, pull through everything on our hook. Again, next stitch is front loop, yarn over, and gently pull through everything. We want to make sure that we're still not tugging too tightly, and continue with one front loop slip stitch into every stitch until we're worked into that last stitch before our following stitch marker stitch. Now from where we're at, since we've made our way all the way down, we're going to chain 1, flip our work, and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and I'll meet you back along the base. Now we've made our way back down with our second row. Now into the base, which are the single crochets on this side of our stitch marker, we're going to use that as the base. So how we're going to connect all of our even number rows is we're going to slip stitch into the same stitch that our previous rows worked into, so it will be occupied. So just into that following stitch, which should be our stitch marker stitch, we're going to insert with a slip stitch. Now we're doing it that way so that we have more rows to work into so that it can fan over our shoulder without tugging too tightly. Now in order to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that following stitch into the base, flip our work, and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Then, just to show you how we're going to connect it into the base once more, at the end of that row, chain 1, flip our work, and put 1 back loop slip into every stitch again, and then I'll meet you back. So we are back. We have worked our way out, did a chain 1, flipped our work, and made our way back down. Now we're going to connect it into the base again. So just as a refresher, we're all going to start by slip stitching into that same stitch that our previous row was worked into. So this one right here, it is occupied, insert with a slip stitch to connect. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that next stitch into the base, flip our work, 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Now we should currently all have a total of 4 rows. We're going to work our way back out for a total of 5, and then I'll meet you guys back at the end of this row so that we can do increases to make our collar a little bit longer, and it will be a total of 5 rows for this portion for everyone, no matter what size we're making. So we are back and we have our first 5 rows complete. Now from here, we're just going to add some increases to make this a little bit longer. So how we're going to add our increases is at the end of every odd number row, we're going to chain 2. Now that first chain will count as a stitch for the following row. Then that second chain is our turning chain and flip our work. Then from here, continue on with our slip stitches, starting with the second chain from our hook. So we're going to skip that first chain into the next. We're going to insert into that back loop, yarn over, pull through everything, and continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Then just to do the increase together once more, slip stitch it into the base the same way that we have been doing this entire time. Make your way all the way down, and I'll meet you back at the end of our following row. We are back and we're at the end of our following odd number row. So what we're going to do from here again is chain 2 and flip our work. Then from here, slip stitch into that second chain from our hook and continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Connect it into the base the same way that we just did. And from here, just continue to repeat these 2 previous rows until we get the total width that we'd like for the collar to be. Then I'll meet you guys back right after an odd number row, so along the outer edge. Then we can talk about how to do the rest from there. So we are back. I now have the total width that I'd like for my collar to be. I have a total of 15 rows. Now all we're going to do from here is just more back loop slip stitch rows, now without any increases or decreases. So since we're along the outer edge, chain 1, flip our work, 1 back loop slip into every stitch, and just continue on with that until we reach our stitch marker stitch within the back. Once we do a chain up a 1 and cut. Then we're going to repeat everything that we did here for the other side, but we're all going to start by inserting our hook into that stitch marker stitch along the left, and for the first row, just work into the available back loops that we left for ourselves, working our way across. Then once we have that completed with the increased rows and everything, then I will meet y'all back once we're worked into our stitch marker stitch, but without a chain up a 1 and cut, because we can go straight into the seam together from there. So we are back. We have made our way all the way around with the second half of our collar, and as you guys can see, I have already went ahead and seamed it together. Now this seam is going to be done exactly the same way as the bottom band and the cuff, so another outside loop slip stitch seam. So just to talk you guys through it, we're going to make sure the work is flipped right side out, right side up. Do the same outside loop slip stitch seam so it can look like another back loop slip stitch row. Then once we don't have any more stitches left, do a chain up 1 and cut. Then once we have that completed, we are all done. The last thing we have to do is just weave in all of our ends. And there you have it. Hope y'all enjoyed the tutorial. Join us on Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. Those links are down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Catch you on the next one. Bye.